It's evident that he cares. What do you care about? Welcome to the Rock Newman Show. It's the Rock Newman Show.
But I'm wondering about the generation now. Will they survive without the Mona's bench? Will they survive in AI, artificial everything? Artificial eyelashes, artificial the inside the eyes to change the eye color, artificial hair, artificial teeth, artificial behind, artificial breasts. The exterior is there. What about the interior?
Greetings, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Rock Newman Show 2.0. My guests today hardly need any introduction, but I want to give them the honor and the courtesy of making an introduction. They are Doctors Leonard and Rosalind Jeffries. And so many of you are familiar with their long history of struggle. This coming Saturday, June the 1st, they will be appearing in the DMV, the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, at the Life Center at Hampton Park, Capitol Heights, Maryland, at 5:30 p.m. They will be doing a presentation, a candid discussion on culture, politics, and economics, titled Pan-Africanism or Perish. Man, and do we want to get into that. Doctors Jeffries, to the both of you, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, it's a great pleasure for us to be able to reach out to as many people as we can to spread the word that we've been lucky to have received in so many places on the map, whether you're talking about Africa or Asia or South America. We've had a chance to have a fantastic experience with that part of the world. And if you're talking about an Emperor Haile Selassie, or a President Kwame Nkrumah, or a Jomo Kenyatta, these are folks who we've had a chance to bond with and to be able to share their historical move on presenting the true African, not the African of the comedy or the African in a much negative light. We know we've been to the palace of Emperor Haile Selassie several times. We know that Kwame Nkrumah had a very strong relationship with the African American because that was where he was getting his base from. Lincoln University. And the elder who introduced my wife and I to the African world struggle and placed us in strategic positions was James H. Robinson, who had a base in Harlem, but he had gone to school with Kwame Nkrumah. So that history is a real part of the going on of the world. So we need to master that as best we can. And luckily, I have a wife who actually was involved in Africa before I was. Don't tell anybody, but she went to Africa, and it was in Nigeria. And so, Rosalind, you could probably
1960.
And what were you involved in?
Yes, we were way up country amongst the Igbo people in Eha Amufu before the University of Nsukka was built. At that time, it was nothing but heavy, thick forest. They had not cleared out the land. But the key thing, too, is that Leonard and I came from ordinary roots. I was born and raised in Harlem, and Leonard was born and raised in Newark. And so the message is to those who are struggling, trying to move up and continue to live. And the problems that existed at that time, the aim was to destroy the families. My family had moved in from the South during the time of the Great Migration, and I was born in Harlem Hospital. And so I have a lot of the vestiges of the post-Harlem Renaissance in me, how I got into the arts and paintings and things of that sort, where the artists were trying to bring in the Africa, because modern art had begun co-joining the traditional cultures of the world in a different way to get a new vision other than the Victorian vision from Europe. And so I came in at a time when you had the Aaron Douglas painting Africa scenes across the street and the County Cullen and the Schomburg Library. And so I was born into a richness. When my family first moved into Harlem, they polished the doorknobs and polished the mailbox, the bronzes, and had little nylon cotton curtains in the door. And so all of those wonderful, good families were growing, but I guess the government had another idea of gentrification, and so they threw in the drugs. My family was practically destroyed over drugs coming in, and many of the others as well. And so therefore, I have a sentiment for those people around the world. Martin Luther King, when he was talking about the ordinary people in Vietnam being killed, when Ralph Bunche was talking about 800 million killed in India and parts of Africa. And so that kind of thing registered me because of the destruction that was going on in some of the places in Harlem. Harlem is gorgeous now because after, of course, it was kind of like wiped out. And now those brownstones are way beyond the price of ordinary folks and ordinary people. But those things happened in China when they had the Opium Wars, the British, to destroy the people. And then a remnant of the British stayed behind and intermarried with some of them. And some of the text said a new race of people came about. And so when I go to Harlem today, I see the married couples, mixed race, and the little baby with a big afro. And so that we are concerned about the thought of perishing. We were on the Carl Nelson show, and he was interested in how do we form and maintain ourselves in a collective unity, thinking that too many individuals rise up and become aggrandized within their own ego, the self-worth, self-value, and that is a defeating form. And so that ballooning the ego is to balloon the individuality. We perish, but take Pan-Africanism and we will survive. We will not perish. So those words were the words of Dr. John Henry Clarke. So beyond Reverend Robinson, the Presbyterian, we had John Henry Clarke, we had Dr. Ben, we had people from Islam, as well as from Christianity. And so we had to learn that our folks got out of slavery. How? Not necessarily through individuality. China has 57 different ethnic groups. And so we had more than that when you think about all of the different parts of Africa that were thrown together where we did not know each other's language and each other's culture and had to begin to bond together. I am still teaching in New York City, and the college where I teach, there's a division for international students, and that's where I teach. And some of my students this year, 2024, I was facing them, and I saw that there was something so different about them that I needed to get a closer understanding of. And it was that these were the ones that grew up in communist China. And so who was their God? The head of state. And if it wasn't the head of state, it was the collective. And so I remember our history back in the 1970s and 80s. The Black Panthers were enamored with Mao Zedong because he had the ability to, whatever ethnic you were, he didn't care. He united everybody under one banner. But that idea of no God was never a part of Africans. We never said that God was dead. And so we came out of Africa because of the moaner's bench. Our people moaned and groaned, and God heard our cry. And so the emancipation came as a wave movement that came from God Supreme. What shall I render? What shall I give? God has everything, and everything belongs to him. It was the blues too, the singing of the blues and the moaning and the groaning. And later on, it became the R&B, the symbol of love. Those love songs from Diana Ross and the Supremes. When I went to Korea, I was so surprised. I went down in the subway, people going to work, and what was piped in was Diana Ross and the Supremes. Mm-hmm. And so that was a love factor. But I'm wondering about the generation now. Will they survive without the moaner's bench? Will they survive in AI, artificial everything? Artificial eyelashes, artificial the inside the eyes to change the eye color, artificial hair, artificial teeth, artificial behind, artificial breasts. The exterior is there. What about the interior?
I have a question to that point that I invite both of you to address. And it's a question that comes as a result of recent time where, to some extent, we are all seem to be addicted to our cell phone, to our computers, to TikTok, to Facebook, to Instagram, and the rest. And when I open up, and a lot of the things that pop up are interviews or conversations where our brothers and sisters are communicating to each other. And there is such an extraordinarily casual use of the word nigger. Oh, nigga, that nigga right there, that nigga right there, that nigga right there, that nigga right there. It seems to be used now more than ever before, so prolifically. And because of you all's history, I really wanted to, I didn't plan to do it this early in the interview, but I really wanted you all to weigh in on it. So please give me your thoughts on the significance of the casuality of Black folks referring to themselves as niggas.
Well, that's a heavy opening part of our discussion, but it should be understood that whoever controls the electricity and the electronics and the images, they control the results. However, with the movement of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King and others who demanded respect in terms of where they were operating, and that passed on to us. I, for example, had my students at City College so excited about going to the classroom that they ran to the classroom. It was a race to see who could get in the classroom. And So I had to race myself to get past them. So they didn't have ruffling at the gate in order to be able to get this new knowledge. Knowledge is power, and African knowledge is African empowerment. And a person like Malcolm was able to master that. A person like King was able to come out of a church, and Daddy King was the king, religious leader, but he was able to still stamp his persona on this awakening. And so we have to understand that we're in a new era. So the music has to be a factor. I, for example, my base was Newark, New Jersey, but it wasn't just Newark, New Jersey of the slums. It was Newark, New Jersey of the conscious families. Our families knew that we were going to be somebody. And if you weren't going to be somebody, get out of the way, and we'll make sure that others in the family process will take their place. And so my mother could envision success for her children, even if they were young, like my younger brother, and even if they were called Puddin as a nickname, that didn't hold them back, because he had to look up to his brother, myself. And I was Little Lenny, because my father was 6 foot something and played in the Negro Leagues in terms of a ball. And so that we pushed aside these barriers and made sure that we could get the richness in the explosion that was taking place. You went to Africa and people were taking their positions on how to make a nation strong, not in the traditional sense of the British or the Dutch or the Germans, but in the tradition of African peoples who believe in the continuity and flow of our humanity. And so we have to give thanks that you allow us to have a few moments to try to give some of our experiences.
And Dick Gregory wrote a book that was called Nigger back then. Leonard talked about those students that were running, but one of the major assignments was, who am I? And so the diversity in that class, can you imagine auditorium style class that Leonard taught? He had 22 different faculty members from Caribbean ambassadors from Africa, grassroots people, all kinds of, the Ivan Van Sertima's, all of the big names Leonard had right there. That's why Black Studies at City College was totally different from Black Studies elsewhere, because we were with the United Nations. Malcolm X, OAAU, was interested in getting the voice of African Americans at the United Nations. And so who am I? Those Caribbeans in his class went home asking their parents, like was the part of the class demand. And many of the Caribbeans said, I'm not African. I'm not African. I am Jamaican. I'm not African. I am Trinidadian, et cetera, et cetera. So once again, we're talking about that same unity, Pan-Africanism or perish. People from India, some of them were Black. And so they didn't know where they stood between the Dalit and the regular mix that was there. So New York City had everything in it. Islamics wearing the bow ties coming to class, the Christians, the sanctified ones who in their sanctuaries wore the little doily on top of the head. And you had the Hindus, you had the atheists, communists in the class, socialists. Everything, can you imagine, was in that class.
Well, that absolutely sounds like a microcosm of progressive and somewhat revolutionary. That it happened that way because of the progressive and revolutionary way that Dr. Jeffries conducted himself and taught his classes. In just doing a little bit of preparation to talk to you all, I came across a paper from 1991 that was written by Kenneth Stern. And I note that he attempted to do everything that he could to have people to disavow you, Dr. Jeffries. He did everything he could to tell folks that you weren't teaching anything of equality, but you were teaching Black superiority, anti-Jewish, anti-Zionism, and the rest. And I suspect you probably remember the paper that I am talking about, but I want to ask you your life experience of reaching for truth and teaching truth, and the absolute backlash that you have had for many, many decades. And I'll wrap my question up with this. When I saw the title of your presentation for June the 1st here at the Life Center at Hampton Park in Capitol Heights, Maryland, when I see that title, Pan-Africanism or Perish, that has to be the Antichrist to the white supremacists.
Well, of course, you're hitting very important points that have been shaking up the world. But most people don't realize that when I was in high school, I was the president of the class, largely Italian youngsters and others, Irish youngsters. And then when I went on to college, they had 5 Black youngsters going to Lafayette College. But the one who made the noise and created a fervor was Len Jeffries. He was the president of the Jewish fraternity, with 5 African Americans and 85 Jewish youngsters. And they had to vote to put me in class. I couldn't run in and say, I want to be the head of this, the head of that. You had to prove yourself to be ready to handle these responsibilities. And so Dan Wooten was the other Jersey boy. He was a football star, but eventually he stayed in the field and became a medical doctor. And so you had in the Jewish fraternity, a brother from Newark, New Jersey, who went on to become an outstanding lawyer, a brother from South Jersey who went through the process and became a surgeon. A football star becomes a surgeon. A baseball star, Leonard Jeffries, becomes a lawyer. And so one of our biggest triumphs was to have a lawyer who was also a Capricorn, by the way, who handled my legal case. And we won the case in the Supreme Court. We didn't sit back and say, woe is us, what can we do? We put together a team of people who were able to put together what was necessary to get through these obstacles that were there. So fortunately, the other African-American who was a part of the fraternity, he went to, he was from New York State, and he eventually went on to become the most successful professor Black in history. He was successful to the extent that he was able to go to Howard and reorganize their engineering department. He was even able to go further than Howard. He went to Morgan State and produced the largest Black studies program, producing more engineers than any program in the nation.
Now, what is the underlining question is, what happens to, Leonard was part of three Blacks chosen in his high school to integrate the high school. So the question is, what happens to Blacks who become, I'm the only Black, or me and my other little buddy, we're Black in the corporation. We live our lives like that. So what happened? Do they become Negroes, so to speak, educated Negroes who leave their identity back in order to change, to blend in and be part of the environment? Or do they kind of like continue to have some relationship from whence they came and the family? And so certainly Spike Lee did a good job of bamboozle and that kind of situation that occurred. But that is indeed, who am I, kind of a question, and who will you continue to be, and whose are you? And our people solve that by, once again, reaching up to a deeper self. Nobody bigger than you and I. The Alex Haley projects that Leonard worked on and was a vital part that would not have existed without Leonard vying with the money in the economics in order to produce Roots. The big thing, it was holding the baby up to God Supreme and saying, behold that which is greater than the self. And so it's that same question of identity, walking around with the cell phone, not knowing who you are, blending in with an electronic system, becoming something else other than what you were born to be. I couldn't even pick up my phone yesterday. My phone picked up my cell phone, and what was on there? Something about expert explained the masculinity crisis, men losing their virility. Pick up the phone and that's what's there. And so, you know, seeing that somebody crossing the street is not going to look for the car. They're going to look in this, so that it's as if the same old questions come up over and over, and the answer is still deep within, to go to the superior God that's in each of us, regardless of race or ethnicity. And the love was so heavy, so that within Christianity, we talk about the blood of Christ being the blood that was orchestrated. The word Emmanuel means God with us. And that means that blood was orchestrated through the multiverse, the universe, God inside his own creation and outside of creation, standing apart, inside time and outside of time. The love was so great, willing to die on the cross, so that the best blood could pay the price. You know, you put something in the loan shop, you go back and get it, you pay a price. And so the price had to be paid. The 1,000 legions of demoniacs, God already knew about and how to cast them out. So today we don't think like that, because we have a new philosophy, a new idea, but yet the intelligence of the anti-human universe is there, and we still have to deal with it. But that love was such that it was, what the question was it a Black Christ or was it a white Christ? Who killed Christ? Was it the Sanhedrin or was it the Romans? The question was not that at all. We fight and battle over that question. The question was, he gave up his own life. The universe was willing to give up that unusual blood. And I say unusual blood because we know about Henrietta Lacks, right, the woman who lived back in the 1940s. Her blood, mitosis through mitosis, continued to multiply. You go to any hospital in Hong Kong, in Australia, in London, Paris, anywhere, Rio de Janeiro, and the standard blood that they use in the hospital and the laboratories is this woman who is long dead. There's a different factor to the blood, so that we haven't even studied to understand the depth of what was done at that particular time to bring forth a platform for us to once again choose who you will serve. Will you serve the demonic forces, or will you serve the Christ that was crucified on your behalf. Leonard and I, were in Africa, and in Africa, we came across these people who were fire eaters, could eat glass. There's a guy in a ceremony, the ritual and stuff, came up and put his face to my face and hammered a nail into the cheek, into the face, and then turned the hammer around and yanked it out, no blood. So we say that Jesus Christ was one that knew all of those kinds of miracles and things, negative and positive, and could have come down off the cross if he willed and wished, but did not, was willing to pay the price to give us a new platform. And so the question is to anybody listening, what platform are you on? Did you choose the Sarah, the Son of God, the Stepan Ra from ancient Kemet, the hieroglyphics? All of that existed before the Bible was written. The title Son of God, the title Stepan Ra existed before the Bible was written, and that means the chosen of God. You out there, no matter what race or color you are, if you choose the Most High, not in the communist system where God is your state, God is your political leader, but if you choose the right God Most High, then you'll be a step in Ra. God will choose you back, and thus you are the chosen. Go run and look in the mirror when you are prayed up, and whatever you see in the mirror, say, that's the chosen, and you'll understand and be in good standing.
I want to bring up a name that I had the good fortune of spending some time with more towards the latter part of his career, really, especially when he was sick. And that was Stokely Carmichael Kwame Ture, who always answered the phone saying, ready for the revolution.
Yes.
And, you know, he was a Howard, we call him a Howard guy. He was a Howard man. But I know that he spent time there in New York during what I would say was you all's times. He would say ready for the revolution. And he was, to everything that I understand, a Pan-Africanist to his core.
Yeah,
that's what he, and that concept is what he believed would liberate folks. So when I saw the name of your speech, where, you know, on Saturday, Pan-Africanism or perish, are you at this point, when so many forces work against the concept and the idea and the reality of Pan-Africanism, are you optimistic that we can achieve that lofty goal?
Well, yes, certainly. My wife and I, we have had these wonderful experiences. And so we believe that that lofty goal can be achieved. Stokely, Kwame Ture, was an extraordinary young man, but he knew when and how to get help. And when he was trying to finish his work, his book, Blueprint for Black Power, he had help.
No, it wasn't Blueprint for Black Power. That's Amos Wilson.
Not Amos Wilson.
But he does have a biography. You have it in the back.
Ready for the revolution.
Yes.
Yes.
Right.
But he did not write it himself. He had a team of people, and it was his buddy from the University of Massachusetts who came down to New York, and then he stayed in an apartment that one of my staff members allowed him to have so that the work on Ready for the Revolution could be finished. And that was Jerry Price's apartment on Convent Avenue, and a place that we now refer to as Dr. Clark House. We actually bought a brownstone in Harlem, which became a center for us to have our personal activities. But Kwame Ture was extraordinary because he also hooked up with Miriam Makeba. And that was an extraordinary relationship because she could just open up her voice, do the click songs and all of this and that. And you just had to have a joy of having a person like her in your midst. We had a chance historically to become involved in the process because when we got to San Jose, we decided to continue the African connection. And so our students, we took 26 of the students from San Jose to Africa. And who went with us? 26 students and two of Dick Gregory's youngest daughters, oldest daughters, Lynn and Michelle.
Mm-hmm.
It was unbelievable when Dick said that him and his wife had decided that they want their daughters to go with us to Africa. So our mouth dropped because
age 7, 9.
You talk about 8-year-old and 11-year-old.
Yeah.
But they were wonderful. They cemented the group as a family. And our students decided who would be responsible for these youngsters, et cetera. When we got into New York and we were trying to get ready for our plane, all of a sudden, here comes a powerful force coming across where we were. And we looked up, and who was it? Josephine Baker. She saw babies, and she was on her knees, had her arms wrapped around them, and said, "Where did these beautiful youngsters come from?" And we said, "These are Lynn and Gregory's oldest children." And then she really wouldn't let them go. And we said we were trying to get to the plane to get on the air. Mm-hmm. But when we got to Guinea and got to Africa, again, we had the phenomena of Miriam Makeba saying, "I know these babies because of her relationship with Dick Gregory and the entertainment world."
But we need to say that Leonard won his case at the Supreme Court.
Right.
He won his case when finally they took him to court, and they, in whose program, Charlie Rose, they all thought that they were going to beat Leonard up, and, right, you know, and it'll be easy and it'd be nothing. But Leonard wore his African outfit to the Charlie Rose program, and it worked in his favor. All of these
and what was
the world?
What was he being charged with? What was Leonard being charged with? What battle did you have to overcome at the Supreme Court?
That freedom of speech to speak about Black history, freedom of speech, the first speech right, law, freedom of speech. And so that they were trying to say that he was not speaking correctly. But what happened was the dean had all of the year after year write-up. You can't teach in a school without the deans writing up how you're doing and what's happening in the class. Leonard brought in the curriculum, suitcases of curriculums that they were using, suitcases of all of that kind of data and material, and the judge could not vote against what he brought in with those people who had perfect, excellent records, 22 professors, so he won his case. And so we have a right to study the history of African Americans. That case was not just for him, it was, and us, it was for all of the Black studies programs throughout the country.
And let me ask you, please let me ask you this, because given recent time with what has been going on with Israel and what has been happening in Gaza, which in my observation, I was very disappointed to hear the Biden administration or Biden himself, Joe Biden himself, come out to say that it wasn't genocide, because what's being practiced is genocide.
Yes.
We see it with our eyes. You see the reports. But so there's a lot of student unrest, students getting locked up, taken away from campus. And certainly your history is that you were heavily involved in student unrest, where it ended up the students, the Black and the Puerto Rican students, had something called the 5 demands. And needless to say, you were in the middle of that. If you can help us with the similarities and the differences between those protests that were, I think it was 1969, and 55 years ago, and what has been happening as of late.
Oh, I was doing. Yeah.
There it is.
That was it. The 5 demands. Yes.
The 5 demands.
That a full feature film that came out, and much of that film had James Smalls in it, who was the head of the student union.
Yeah.
And these were the students protesting, and knowing what they were demanding were just obvious things. But that story is not necessarily Leonard's story, and it is. Leonard's story was not necessarily with the students there, but as an administrator over the students. His parallel is with people like Malefi Asante, head of Black Studies at Temple University.
Right.
His story is with Dr. James Turner at Cornell University, running the Black Studies program there.
With Dr.
Nick
Ben
Nelson in Ohio, Oba Tashaka in San Francisco,
Right.
Ron Walters. It was at that level. That's where Leonard's story is not written. And when we were at San Jose State University, the Hells Angels came after us. And so we had that battle to fight. A Black person got killed. And so that story is not told and is not done correctly. So that, yes, the protests on the campus, the campus is there, and that story is told right in here. And the international world is certainly a problem. Hamas is the culprit, and Israel itself is after Hamas, but we don't know what Hamas is doing fully on other than that elsewhere. But definitely, just like you said, the truth is the truth, and how many are killed and when and how is on the screen.
And one of the most important encounters was with the biggest mouth in New York. And his name was Ed Koch, the mayor of New York.
Yeah.
And he wanted a piece of my behind.
Yeah.
And so my brother said, have no fear. When you go to see Ed Koch, I'm going with you. And so my brother, who was into the martial arts and who was a veteran, accompanied me as we crossed the streets, Fifth Avenue, where St. Patrick Cathedral is, to the Rockefeller Plaza, where these big, enormous office buildings are. And so it was raining, but we still were going on our mission to engage Ed Koch. Mm-hmm. And in doing so, we turned our story around because Ed Koch had a chance to see us personally. He heard noise in the bathrooms. That was my brother and I trying to dry off from the rainstorm that we were in. And he decided this is a perfect time for him to raise his cane about me. And so we sat in his office. He put out 2 tape recorders in front. He said, this one is for you and your bodyguard. I said, no, he's not my bodyguard. He's my brother, who is a military man. And so that is a recording, which is unbelievable because Koch's major partner, legal partner, said everybody in the world should have seen the engagement of Koch and Jeffries in his office. So somehow when we put our files and stuff together, that will be one of the areas that we will have.
So Leonard is not anti-Jewish. He's not anti-Islam. Just a couple of years ago, he had some surgery done and had to come out into rehab. And what rehab did he go to? A Jewish rehab that had all of the Jewish tablets and stained glass in the place. And that February came, all the yarmulke wearing Jews wanted him to give a lecture to them about Martin Luther King on Martin Luther King's Day.
Right.
And Leonard was used to that, as he mentioned, because of his being the head of a Jewish fraternity when he was in college. So we grew up in multicultural, cosmopolitan America, and we didn't grow up in a racist kind of fighting racism is what we grew up with, fighting the racism.
And, history points to that part of what you all were sort of son and daughter of the earth, of truth, of the Black experience. And that when you stand firm to talk about the reality of the Black experience and not, as Dick Gregory and many others would have called, his story of the Black experience. Oh, when you challenge their falsehoods, you become controversial, persona non grata, and they attempt, if not to kill you, to character assassinate you. And Dr. Jeffries, I have seen through the years that I have been aware of you since my days at Howard University, that consistent, unfair character assassination, and that you have survived and kept yourself intact, kept your dignity, kept your manhood, and remained a king. I want to just tell you from my little place here in the world, thank you for who you have been, for what you have done, and what you continue to do.
Well, I'm going to say we, although my wife is right here to speak for herself, I'm going to say that we have lived an enormous life sustaining our truth. And we will be writing larger issues on it. I had a Rockefeller Foundation. I've had a Ford Foundation. I've had a Carnegie Corporation $250,000 foundation. You do not give this type of resources to someone who is a nut, who's crazy, and who is not doing what he's supposed to do. But that's on our statement. Carnegie, Rockefeller, and the inner degrees and support that you get. James Turner stands alongside of me. Ronald Walters stood alongside of me. These are the greatest of our new comers to this. Mm-hmm. And each of them, James Turner's Cornell base has a building that's just all library. And Dr. Ben used to go up there on a week, during the week in a plane, and to give out lectures, and then get back to New York to give his lectures back into New York.
So if I can ask you, with all of your long history, what is it now that you all are working on, and what do you want to see happening in the days to come?
Well, I do have a share screen, but I don't know how long it would be. But even if just a little bit of it, I'd like to show, and that would be the answer, because that was just a matter of a couple of days ago. So can I share screen?
Let's try that. Let's try it.
Okay.
to tap on their shoulders in order to carry forth the great work of the Kwame Nkrumahs, the Sacred Degree, the other great leaders that I've had a personal chance to relate to. And in fact, the research and whatnot I've done on development in the Ivory Coast and other places has been inspired by others whose name we did not call today. But I do want to call out. You cannot talk about Africa in any way without understanding the work of the great Sheikh Anta Diop. You have to understand the legacy that we stand on is an enormous legacy. It's not a game that we're playing. It's the reality. Without great African leadership, male and female, inspiring the youth, we cannot expect to make the moves that we need to make. So we want to thank Jabril Diallo and others who made it possible. And certainly, I hope to get out my books. Dr. Jeffries, when are you coming out with the books? It's not a chance for me worrying about the books. I got to get into the field and push the leadership on. You have to understand, going to Madagascar, when I was asked to go to Madagascar, I was shocked that even Madagascar and the islands in the Indian Ocean are part of the African world experience. And so we want to give thanks to Jabril and those around him, and also certainly the young people. Where are those young people we just saw? They need to hold up their hands so we can give them a chance. These are tears of joy, not sadness. The fact that you could recreate all of this greatness and invite a few of us old folks to be around is what we need and what we expect. Of joy, not sadness. And I'm glad I could do it with my partner for life, Dr. Rosalind Jeffries, an expert in African history and culture. If I could just find the millionaires and the billionaires to pledge to support the work and the ideas that are happening, we'd be on our way. So I intend to do everything I can to contact all those millionaires and billionaires to make sure they don't forget the place that we have carved out for ourselves and that we can do it. I have in my family alone, in Atlanta, the Bronner brothers, all multimillionaires, and in my other places of visiting and whatnot. Africans are ready if we can make the statements to them about what is needed. Africa is one of the wealthiest parts of the human family on planet Earth. If anybody has been to Africa to see all of the greatness, the gold, the diamonds, the uranium, the agriculture products, the cocoa, the coffee, Africa is not on its knees. It's waiting for people to stand up and organize. And with these little tears of joy, and with my wife here, knowing that anybody who could stay married with me for 50 years deserves a special acknowledgement. So I go to my rewards with a smile, with a knowledge that it's in good hands. These youngsters, they outdo the leaders that are in place. The youngsters are prepared to do anything. And so we have to give them the support that is necessary. So it's in our hands. The future of Africa is not to be waiting on someone from the UN to come with a special program. We need to come up with programs ourselves. And so that's why I'm very glad that so many of you are here and looking so beautiful, looking so fancy. Look at these hairstyles. Look at this is really a reality show for African peoples, showing their best and what they intend to do with the legacy. Chester Higgins, can you imagine the work that he's done and needs to be, give him an acknowledgement. Thanks to Jibril. And my brother, my baby brother, who is the father of Hakeem Jeffries and whatnot, a person who had a chance to deal with these Jeffries boys early on in life is someone called Jibril Jallo. He lived with my brother. My brother waited for him to come from the UN so that he could be walked to the house without fear of being mugged. And my brother, in fact, had to take some measures to protect Jibril. This is a great story of Africanist that we've got to begin to utilize and make it work for us. Shekau Diop is one of the greatest men to ever walk on the planet. And when you have to go out of the continent itself, you got to go. You can't leave out. And he says there, out of the flow of African greatness, you can't go to Yamoussoukro and see where the dream of Houphouët-Boigny was to build a new city of God. They weren't playing games. They were serious. And we have to tap into that. So I'm glad to have these little tears that came. We need more than tears, so you might as well forget about the tears, Len Jeffries, and call upon Africans to stand and be counted. And join the great brotherhood of Africans on all these islands of the Pacific and the Indian Ocean and in the mountains. You go into the African mountains, the mountains of Guinea, whatnot. It's a magnificent community. And to go into the other spots, Kwame Ture. And certainly my wife said, don't forget. And Miriam. Don't forget Miriam Makeba and Kwame Ture. Nelson Mandela and Winnie. And of course, we have had a special relationship with Nelson Mandela and Winnie, who came to Newark, New Jersey, to ask us about education. And so we could stay here all night, emphasizing the importance of our responsibility. I did not expect to say anything but just to sit back like an old man and enjoy myself. However, we are in a sacred moment of trying to prepare the future for our people, and we are capable of doing it. So I'm saying, stand up, Africans everywhere, on every island, and every mountain, and every important plantation. Stand up and make a statement to the world that we are ready to walk on the planet and take an African spot that can be told about and talked about for generations to come. Merci beaucoup. And don't forget,
the exhibition that was at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the African origin of civilization. When I got my degrees from Yale University, I worked at the Metropolitan Museum of Art with the treasures of ancient Nigeria. But the cream of the crop for me was to see that sign out the Metropolitan Museum of Art that said the African origin of civilization, which means that the public schools throughout the world have a right to talk about the African origin of civilization and the work that the mothers, the grandmothers, the aunts, in raising the children, how important that is for developing nationhood. That's right. May 24th, 2024, Leonard at the United Nations, and show you the entire United Nations people assemble under Dr. Jibril Diallo. And Leonard, they had an education committee, and young folks were there too and presenting. And after presenting, they did not mention some of the kinds of things that we know in history. And so they asked Leonard to speak as an elder at the very end. And Leonard spoke talking about the significance of Cheikh Anta Diop. And I talked about the exhibition at the Metropolitan Museum of Art entitled The African Origin of Civilization. And so with the things that we were talking about, those Senegalese know that the university in Dakar is named after Diop, and that his laboratory is a special place in the country, and his contributions. In the film that I had kind of like to share, showed the son of Cheikh Anta Diop and Leonard and I at the astronomical observatory. And so that at the end, the whole group came and swarmed Leonard. United Nations people from different countries came and swarmed Leonard because they had gotten to the point where they weren't mentioning the Black heroes who did have something and things to do with the United Nations. So that we're moving so fast, we forget who contributed what and what things, even in science, our Blacks in science, we forget and take for granted and give the contribution to other people when indeed these were Blacks in science.
And it's extraordinary to have a large, magnificent museum like we have in the middle of New York on the Fifth Avenue. And Rosalind worked, she had a job there for some time.
Yeah, as soon as I got my degree, my PhD at Yale University in the History of Art department, that was my first real job at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. I was hired just before the exhibition, The Treasures of Ancient Nigeria, came to the museum, working firsthand with authentic objects from Nigeria. And then, but the one that was up in 2021, 22, going into 23, that topped the cake, because to put that sign outside of the museum meant that all public school teachers from grade kindergarten straight on up to college, the space was set for the truth of the African origin of civilization using the basic data, because Cheikh Anta Diop wrote a book where all of the peer review people approved of the book and said that his science was correct, and that book was published by the United Nations.
Well, to have that kind of impact and to try to expose that book, speaking about the origins of of all civilization. For you to be, for you to be able to get that on the front of that church, we should never downplay symbolism. And to have that there, at least trying to implement the truth again in a very outwardly obvious way, is just another piece of you all's work. And, again, as we begin to wrap up here, I just want to thank you for your time here, but much more importantly, for the incredible service that you have tried to provide for all of us.
Well, we've been blessed to have so many different opportunities to bring the truth out. So we're glad that you have joined the ranks, and we don't hesitate to raise this enormous truth. The publishers for Dr. Shekanta Diop and others have these volumes of books available, and people need to make sure that they get a copy. The Shekanta Diop's oldest son, Mbaki, has written a book on the life of his father and the different moves that he had to make around the world, either in France or in other parts of Africa. And
Okay.
we know these brothers as having committed to families, but committed to the legacy of greatness that they are.
And I encourage everyone in the DC, Maryland area and Virginia area, and from further around also, to come see this couple, Doctors Leonard and Rosalind Jeffries, Saturday, June the 1st, 5:30 p.m. at the eLife Restaurant, the Life Center at Hampton Park, Capitol Heights, Maryland. Thank you so much for joining me today.
And this is the flyer that Rosalind, you want to mention.
And I just wanted to, on the flyer, it has a phone number, 301-324-6900.
I'm sure Dr. Baruch, the proprietor, will be happy that you did that. Thank you so much. And folks, thanks for tuning in to another version of the Rock Newman Show 2.0. We go in peace.